Hey, my name's John Jones. We're over here at the Lake Y Project, something we're working on with Bassmaster for 4 or 5 years now. Been a lot of fun, and one of the tools that we're using is fish feed to increase production. And it may sound really simple, like just put out a fish feeder and fish will come. It's not nearly as simple as you might think. You want to put a little bit of thought into what you're going to do. So first off, decide on what type of feeder you're going to use. This particular feeder is made by Texas Hunter. There's a lot of options out there. This one holds about 5 bags of feed. You want a bigger capacity feeder, something that you don't have to fill often. This is a chore that you're going to be doing 8 months out of the year. And so the fewer times that you have to fill it, the better. Some other things you're going to want to think about are where you're going to put it. You look around, there's a big, beautiful lake right here. We're going to want to space the feeders throughout the lake. Most likely the number of feeders at this lake are going to be based on budget. But you'll want to size or right size the number of feeders to what your budget is first. But you want to think about where you put it. If you look here along the sides, we could see that there was a flooding event recently. The water came up about 1.5 feet. So probably don't want our expensive fish feeder being flooded. Try to keep your feeder from being flooded during normal flood events. Big floods happen. Probably you're going to have to work on your feeder after a big flood unless you put enough time and money into a platform, but try to keep it out of the common flooding areas. Where are you going to put it? Well, generally you'd like to have it by some deeper water. Why? There's going to be a lot of fish relating to that deeper water. You're trying to get both your bait fish and your game fish around the feeder, and having some deep structure close to the feeder is going to be able to utilize this. It means you'll be able to utilize this as a fishing hotspot as well. You want to think about where the wind's coming from. In this particular lake, the wind comes a couple different ways depending on the season, but usually you want to take your feeder and you want to point it with the prevailing wind so that the wind is going to carry your feeder away from the bank. If you don't do that, most likely over time you're going to end up with some erosion. Sometimes you just got to deal with it, but it's something to really think about. If possible, you'd like to feed somewhere between 1 and 5 pounds per acre per day. And so we generally put one of these feeders out for every 2 to 3 acres of lake. That's just a rule of thumb, but it's a pretty good rule of thumb. Other things you're going to want to think about with the feeder is ease of filling. This is something you're going to be doing at least monthly. And so you don't want to make it where you're manhandling a bag of fish food 100 yards just to fill it every month. What you'll end up doing is not filling it frequently. So try to put these in a place that's easy to get to. Sometimes it's worth spending a little bit of work improving access and putting the feeder where it needs to be to reduce the amount of labor later on. You're going to want to make sure that the solar panel can get some sunlight. That's really important. Otherwise you'll be chasing batteries all the time. It can be a little bit frustrating. I think Brandon's a biologist with our company, and he deals with feeders day in and day out. He could point out some other things to think about, some other considerations when you're dealing with the fish feeder.
All right, we're going to talk a few things about feeders, mainly the mechanisms, how the feeder works. We'll start here with the timer and the battery setup. Most of your fish feeders have a 12-volt or 6-volt battery system with a programmable timer. We like to program our feeders to go off 2 or 3 times a day. Morning and evening are the best times. We like to throw in a midday feeding as well. It keeps your fish more active. If you're a landowner and you like to show off your fish to people, the likelihood of the fish coming up and feeding during the middle of the day is greater because you have a midday time. Obviously, your evening and your morning times predominantly have the best feeding activity there, but we like to start with as much time as needed for the fish to consume the feed in about 5 to 10 minutes. Also, you have to consider the size of the lake, how much feed you're putting in. So within that 5 to 10 minutes, we also like to consider 1 to 5 pounds per acre per day of feed. So over the course of a year, you can experience some battery issues. They could be caused from an improperly placed solar panel. It's good to have your solar panels placed on either the south or the west side of the feeder. That's going to get the most sun. We run our feeders all year long as well. We find that running the electrical components and having the motors run all year keeps them working. Sometimes if they set continuously for several months during the winter time, they don't start up and run properly in the spring. So next we'll go with the inside of the feeder. One thing you'll notice, it's kind of a breezy day. This particular feeder has clips on the top. Even though this feeder is clipped, in a strong storm, this lid could blow off, so it does have places for clips to be placed to secure your lid. There's also a place on this feeder for the batteries to be secured. So we'll open it up here. No matter what feeder you have, at some point in time, it's going to leak water. So what we like to do is we like to take a rubber sealant and spray all the seams down. Every spot where water can get through a feeder, if your feeder may have a sight glass, we'll spray that down as well. But that's going to help keep the water infiltrating and getting into your feed. Also, we like to empty our feeders a month at a time. So we set them where they need to be refilled. If you let your feeder go too long, depending on if you're in a humid environment, your feed could possibly spoil while it's in the feeder.
All right, well, thanks, Brandon, for that. I think it's important to remember that once you've decided to supplement the growth in your lake through fertilization, or in this case, fish feed, that you do it consistently. You know, these in one way or another are considered livestock, these fish, and you've now increased the carrying capacity beyond the natural capacity of the lake. So you want to be regimented with keeping them full, make sure that you check them frequently, have a system that works for you. I'd rather see a little bit of feed going every day than having a lot and then having big gaps. That's not productive for what we're trying to do here. You know, it's important to think about the quality of feed. We manufacture our own feed. That's got a 46% protein and a good high fat content. This is a great feed. There's several aquaculture grade feeds out there that you'll want to feed your game fish. Do not use the low protein stuff. Don't use the mixed species stuff. That's not what you want to do if you're trying to grow a lot of fish or big fish. Spend the money, get the better feed, and you'll get a much better conversion ratio on your feed. Well, it's a little bit funny to think about. You know, a low protein feed may save you $5 or $10 on the bag, but it may only grow 1/10 as many pounds of fish. So this is one of those places you don't want to scrimp. You want to feed the best feed that you can afford to feed and within your management goals. There's a lot of great brands of feeders out there, or at least a few brands. They all have their pros and cons. There's no such thing as a perfect feeder today. And the person that maintains the feeder is actually the most important one. The feeder doesn't have to be expensive to be reliable, but it does require frequent checking and some sort of system to make sure that it's always working during the season. The one thing you really want to try to do is have a feeder that does not flood. When this fish feed, which is made up of all kinds of stuff, but a big portion of it is chopped up fish, when it gets wet and turns to a type of peanut butter, it is not a pleasant thing. And so put a lot of thought into where you put this feeder, and it should last you for years. And if you have the time or the resources, it's good to put these on a pier. That's going to make a feeder last much, much longer. I always say, kind of tongue in cheek, that the second that water touches the inside of this feeder, you've started cancer, and you've started the countdown till when you're going to replace it. So more effort into keeping them dry is going to pay off with how long this feeder is going to last.